Thursday is going to be our first budget report out. We do have, I would say, a condensed calendar in regards to the budget report outs from the budget committees, because we'd like to have all of the recommendations from the budget committees referred to the Appropriations Committee before we go on turnaround. So it's going to be a very concise calendar and very challenging as well. But we'd like to have all those done before we go on turnaround. Obviously, as I mentioned with the budget chairman when we met yesterday, the calendar is fluid, so we'll just kind of see how things go in regards to the budget recommendations. And if we do have to carry over, of course we will. But that's the tentative dates of when we're going to be having the budget recommendations from the budget committees. The first item on the agenda today are bill introductions. And I have a bill introduction. It's RS 21 RS 0777. And it's an act concerning hospitals relating to rural hospitals, providing grant assistance to hospitals in certain counties, prescribing powers, duties, and functions of the Secretary of Health and Environment related thereto, establishing the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Program and Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Fund. So I move the introduction of that bill. Is there a second? Second by Representative Hoffman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bills introduced. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of bills. The first one is RS 0705. It's an asbestos fund bill. Last year in our budget, we created the asbestos fund through a proviso. This would just make the asbestos fund in statutory. And then RS 0665 is a joint committee on information technology bill that would make that committee see different IT projects before they are sent out for RFP instead of after, much like the building committee does with buildings. So those are the two bills. So I move the adoption of those bills.
Committee, you heard the motion of two bills. Is there a second? Second by Representative Helgerson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Bills are introduced. Any further bill introductions? All right, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is a briefing by the Expanded Lottery Act. And so I would ask that Gabrielle Hull with the Legislative Research Department address the committee. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, committee. As the chair mentioned, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I am the fiscal analyst assigned to the Kansas Lottery and Kansas Racing and Gaming. Before we get started, I did want to mention that you should have 3 documents available to you. 2 are colorful charts showing expanded lottery and traditional lottery revenue distribution. And then there should be a chart showing the Expanded Lottery Act Revenue Fund. And we will begin on the Expanded Gaming Revenue Distribution colorful chart. So just for a quick overview, in Kansas, we do have the traditional lottery, which would include games such as Keno, Scratchers, and then we have some Kansas-specific games like Kansas Super Cash. In 2007, the Expanded Lottery Act was established, which allows gaming at racetracks and casinos in limited jurisdictions where approved by local voters. And under the Expanded Lottery Act, Kansas has 4 gaming zones. We have the Northeast Gaming Zone where Hollywood Casino is, the Southeast Gaming Zone with Kansas Crossing, South Central with the Kansas Star Casino, and then Southwest with Boot Hill Casino. So the document provided to you shows expanded lottery revenue distribution using fiscal year 2020 actuals. And we'll begin at the center of the chart. You can see that expanded lottery gaming revenue is comprised of the gaming revenue from the 4 gaming zones I mentioned previously. And in fiscal year 2020, expanded gaming revenues totaled $334.1 million. And by statute, that revenue is distributed in 4 ways. So starting in that upper left-hand corner with those green bubbles, 73% is distributed to the lottery gaming facility managers to pay for the cost of oversight and regulation and the operation of their respective gaming facility. And the portion that the facility managers receive is based on their facility contracts. That portion equaled $243.7 million in fiscal year 2020. And the per facility breakdown is also shown in that chart. And moving to the bottom left-hand corner, 22% is transferred to the Expanded Lottery Act Revenues Fund, which I will refer to as ELARF, just to shorten that title. And I want to draw your attention to that other chart provided to you. That'll help show these totals as I talk through this. In fiscal year 2020, transfers totaling $73.6 million were made to ELARF. For this, the funds can be used for the reduction of state debt. Expenditures for that purpose can be seen under the header Department of Administration in the top of that table and equaled $36.6 million in fiscal year 2020. As you can see, the reduction of state debt is primarily used for KPERS obligation bonds, and a small portion is used to pay off public broadcasting bonds, which will be paid off in fiscal year 2021. The funds can also be used for the reduction of unfunded actuarial liability, which is currently being used for KPERS employer contributions, shown under the header Department of Education in the table. And expenditures for that purpose in fiscal year 2020 were $41.6 million. Additionally, the funds can be used for the University Engineering Initiative. Transfers for that purpose were $10.5 million in fiscal year 2020, with each of the respective universities receiving $3.5 million. And in the bottom portion of the table, you can see the gaming revenue transfer into ELARF equaling $73.6 million, referenced on that colorful bubble chart. And in fiscal year 2020, a transfer was made from the state general fund in the appropriations bill to meet expenditure and transfer requirements, given the decreased revenue during the COVID-19 pandemic. And Stephen Durrell, the executive director, does join us as well today, and he'll touch a little bit more on that. So moving back to the colorful expanded lottery chart, in the upper right-hand corner, 3% is distributed to cities and counties of each gaming zone. Cities and counties received $10.0 million in fiscal year 2020. Statute does break down how those are distributed to the cities and counties, and that is just based on if the casino is located in the city or county in the gaming zone. And finally, 2% is transferred to the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund, and that amount equaled $6.7 million in fiscal 2020. And those funds can be used for treatment for those diagnosed with problem gambling disorders, research regarding the impact of gambling on Kansans, or the treatment of alcoholism, drug abuse, or other addictive behaviors. And Mr. Chairman, that completes my remarks on the Expanded Lottery Act. I have provided an overview of traditional lottery distribution for the committee's reference as well, which I can go over, or I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Gabrielle, why don't you just go ahead and go over that?
Sure. So moving to that other colorful chart provided to you, traditional lottery is distributed differently than expanded lottery. Starting on the left side, you can see that fiscal year 2020 actual traditional lottery sales equaled $273.9 million. And first, in that upper left-hand corner with the green bubble, no less than 45% of total sales must be paid to players for player prizes by statute, but a larger portion can also be used for that purpose. And it has been done that way in the past. So for example, in fiscal year 2020, 60.8% of total sales were returned to players, equaling $166.5 million. Additionally, a portion of total lottery sales does pay for lottery administrative costs, cost of sales, and then commissions, which equaled $25.6 million in fiscal year 2020. The remaining traditional lottery revenue then passes through the State Gaming Revenues Fund. That first $50 million is split 4 ways. First being the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, or EDIF, which receives 85% of that first $50 million chunk. And those funds can be used for the expansion of current or the establishment and attraction of new commercial industrial enterprises. The Correctional Institutions Building Fund also receives 10% of that $50 million. And that is for the use and benefit of our state correctional institutions. The Juvenile Alternatives to Detention Fund receives 5% of the $50 million used for the development and operation of community-based alternatives to detention. And that's in accordance with a grant program by the Secretary of Corrections. And then finally, on the bottom, for that first $50 million, the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund receives $80,000, which is a statutorily set amount. And then the remaining portion after that first $50 million is split up. The Veterans Programs receives $1.26 million, and $1.7 million went to mental health programs in fiscal year 2020, with the remaining state general fund equaling $16.5 million. And that concludes my remarks on traditional lottery, and I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Gabrielle. First, going back to the expanded Gaming Act, in regards to the casinos in fiscal year 2020, obviously they were closed for a period of time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Do we have any idea what a loss of revenue was during the time that they were closed? And also, when they did reopen, obviously there were some precautions put into place as far as social distancing and how that might impact the revenue numbers for the four casinos across the state.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is a great question. Stephen Durrell is probably the best one to answer that question. That is primarily what he will go over in his presentation. But if there are any questions after that, I would be happy to look into that further for you.
Okay. And I can ask Stephen that. And then when you were going through the breakdown on the Kansas lottery, the first $50 million, as you mentioned, goes into basically 4 different silos that was statutorily put in place in 1987 with the Lottery Act. And then I just kind of wanted to point out that the mental health programs that received about $1.7 million was actually, that derives from the vending machines that we approved. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right, I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that. Because we had dedicated funds from the revenue from the vending machines. And you said there were approximately 200 across the state?
Yes, and I believe this is also in Stephen's presentation. I think he will give you an update. 272 machines were ordered in that first round and put into place. And then he can discuss a little bit their plan moving forward for fiscal year 21 and 22.
Okay, and maybe I'll ask Stephen then what the anticipation is for more vending machines across the state of Kansas. Representative Carpenter. All right. Any further questions for Gabrielle? Okay, I think you answered everybody's question. Thank you for being here. I will go now and turn it over to an update from the Kansas Lottery and Racing and Gaming Commission. And as Gabrielle mentioned, that'll be Stephen Durrell, and so I welcome you to committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Sorry, good morning, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. Chairman Waymaster, it's a pleasure to see you again, and the members of the committee, all the new members. Also want to thank Gabrielle for a very good summation about what it is that we do. I should mention that I am not going to speak for the Racing and Gaming Commission this morning. They are their own agency, headed by the very able Don Brownlee. And if you have any questions about the specific regulation of casinos, the regulation of the casino managers, they would be the ones to talk to. We sort of at the lottery are responsible for the ownership and operation of the casino style games at our casinos. And then of course we are responsible for the traditional side of the lottery, which are scratch tickets and draw games and that sort of thing. Also on the call this morning is Matt Schwartz, our Director of Finance. And so He'll be around to answer any questions that you might have that I may not be able to answer. So we'll sort of check in with him at the end of my summation. You've got the written testimony in front of you. I will try not to read it because I know you guys get bored with just reading what you've already got in front of you. So I will try to give you the highlights. And if you have any questions, please let me know. But and I may cover some things that Gabrielle covered, but we'll try to cover just the basics. So starting with the traditional lottery sales, net sales for traditional lottery in 2020 totaled about 274, almost 275 million, as compared to 295 million in fiscal year 2019. It should be noted that fiscal year 2019 represented the highest sales that lottery ever had. And a lot of that was based on, we had some very large jackpots in the Mega Millions and Powerball arena, and that of course drove a lot of sales to our draw games. Those were in October and March of 2018 and 2019 respectively. We also had a very good Super Kansas Cash jackpot that we were working on against last year for sales. So we don't have a lot of control over what the jackpots are in the big draw games, or such as Mega Millions and Powerball. So we sort of have to focus on things that we can sort of have better control over. And that, of course, would be our instant ticket sales. And our instant ticket sales in fiscal year 2020 were almost 186 million, which was up from 165 million in fiscal year 2019. That's an increase of about 12%, which was, as mentioned, veterans benefits got about $1.8 million of that increased sales. There's been a lot of things that we've done to try to focus our attention on instant sale or instant ticket games. We've readjusted sort of our catalog, made sure that we've tried to keep product out there that our players are interested in, and then also focused on getting into the retail locations, doing better jobs of displaying sales information, and also how tickets are presented and that sort of thing. So it's been a very conscious effort on the part of our sales and marketing team, and they deserve a lot of credit for making sure that increase in sales has been productive. Total combined sales for all draw games in 2020 was 89 million compared to 129 million in fiscal year 2019. As I mentioned, those of course were largely driven by lower jackpot game totals in Powerball and Mega Millions. I should also mention, through the first 6 months of fiscal year 2021, sales have totaled 146.9, almost 147 million, compared to smaller jackpot levels compared to fiscal 19 have contributed to lower draw game sales in Kansas. Of course, that was before we had a good run of almost $1 billion jackpot in Mega Millions, and then also a very large Powerball Mega Millions, Powerball jackpot during the same time frame over the last month and a half or so. So our draw ticket sales have increased considerably over that time period, and we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end. So anyway, but our sales have for draw games have been up almost 17% over the same time last year. So we're continuing to do well in our instant ticket sales. In fiscal year 2020, the lottery paid out more than $166 million to lottery players, along with retailer commissions of almost a little over 16 million. As the chairman mentioned, we do have vending machines that have been authorized by the legislature. We started out with an original order of 272 machines, and right now about 200 of those are out in retail locations. We're limited to 2 machines per retail location by statute. The reason some of those machines are still waiting to be placed. There are 3 different types of machines that we currently have available to us. We have what we call the HD machine, which looks like a very large, typical, what you would assume looks like a vending machine. We have the 54-inch machines, which are smaller, that you see in a lot of larger retail chains like Walmart. Those are the ones that they want. And then we have what we call the EX machines, which are social environment machines. And those are designed to be more placed in bars, restaurants, and those sorts of things where they're more socially interactive than they are just a typical vending machine. They don't sell instant games. They don't sell scratch tickets. They only sell draw games. And so obviously, as we've had issues with social environments in general over the last year or so, we're still waiting to place those as we can get back into a more normal time where we can have a social environment focus. We are planning over the next fiscal year, and the fiscal year 2022 budget has an allocation for about 70 additional machines. We're planning to focus again more on the HD machines, which are typically what we would envision a vending machine to look like. They're tall, they're video board impressive, and they're very attractive with players. Our vending machines over the last month have been very helpful, particularly with the increased draw game jackpots. Those have been very popular, and we've seen a definite help having those machines out there with an increase in sales in those areas. Gabrielle did a very good job of talking about transfers. I'll just do a quick recap. In fiscal year 2020, the Economic Development Fund got 42 some odd million. Juvenile Detention Facilities Fund got about $2.5 million. Correctional Institutions Building Fund got almost $5 million. Problem Gaming and Addictions Fund got the $80,000 from the traditional side of the lottery. The Problem Gaming and Addictions Fund gets a lot more from the casino side of our business. They get, and we'll get to that number in a few minutes, but statutorily, the traditional lottery sends 80,000 over. Veterans programs got 1.2 million. Mental health programs got 1.7 million. As the chairman mentioned, that money comes specifically from sales from vending machines, and we've done very well in our vending machine sales over the last year. And then the state general fund got a little over 16 million. Let's see. We talked about I did want to just sort of point out that we did talk about 1.2 million roughly for the veterans games, veterans military, the veterans fund. The total that the lottery has contributed since the veterans benefit game issue was added to legislation in 2003 brings the total that the lottery's contributed to veterans fund issues to about 20 million. I should also mention that in fiscal year 20, the state collected almost $698,000 in income taxes from prizes that were withheld. And then also we collected about $192,000 from the state set-off program that we run a lot of our winners through. Wanted to also talk about our Players Loyalty Program, our Play-On program that became active in 2017. We have about 283,000 active members in our Play-On program. It's been very successful for us. Players use the Play-On program to scan winning and non-winning tickets into their account, and we've had about 46 million tickets entered by players. They can then redeem those scans for points and then enter for additional contests that they can win prizes, cash, used to be trips. We're not doing trips obviously right now so much, but we are focusing on other things that they can invest those points in. We did go through our recent holiday raffle as we do every year, and we sold out this year 150,000 tickets, and our $1 million winner was announced live on January 5th across the state on all our state NBC stations, and it should be noted that ticket has not yet been claimed. So somewhere out there's $1 million raffle winner who is waiting to tell us that they're a winner. As always, the lottery offered a number of instant scratch tickets with interactive games and second chance drawings. We launched about 44 instant tickets during fiscal year 2020, and of course focused a lot on some of our sports partnerships, the Chiefs, the NHRA, Heartland Nationals, NASCAR, and Kansas Speedway. We also then collaborated with also a lot of our local community events, such as the Kansas State Fair. We work with them and Country Stampede, and also then Riverfest in Wichita. This year, we also saw the launch of our Rivalry Riches ticket, which was a ticket that focused on our friendship and sponsorships of our KU and K-State programs. We had a ticket that featured both the mascots of KU and K-State this year, and it was a very popular ticket for us. It was one of those things that it was designed to be our second chance prizes that went along with that ticket were designed to be trips to away games and to other events that were specifically related to the universities. And that's been sort of tempered the last year because of travel restrictions and other things. So as we move through the next year or so with that ticket or a refresh of that ticket, we're pretty confident that it's, as people get the ability to go back to, hopefully bowl games and that sort of thing, that that will be another popular ticket for us. So far in fiscal year 2021, the instant game category continues to perform well, outpacing our 2020 sales with nearly 99.5 million through the first 6 months. Total draw games for the first 6 months when this was written was about 47.4 million. Across all games year to date sales were 146, almost 147 million, which is about 15 million more than the same period during fiscal year 2020. The lottery has transferred in fiscal year 2021 about $32 million to the state so far. Since the lottery's been in existence through fiscal year 2020, back when it started in 1987, the net sales have been more than 6.5 billion. Nearly 3.6 billion has been won by players. We've created 100 millionaires in the state. More than $370 million has gone to our lottery retailers as part of their sales program. And then more than 1.9 billion has been transferred to the state. All right, let's talk about expanded gaming. The chairman was correct that from March 17th of 2020 through about May 22nd, roughly, of 2020, all of the casinos were closed for any number of pandemic-related reasons. They were allowed to reopen in that last week of May of last year, and they continue to operate now under the auspices of their local health requirements. There is a overall state number of requirements that they are required to meet before they can reopen, and then they are required to follow the rules of their local state health officials as required. For example, then Wyandotte County and Hollywood Casino have stricter requirements about reopening and how they can remain open than some of our smaller counties, just based on the requirements of those counties. Overall, the net revenue for the last year for all our casinos was down about 18.7%. The lowest amount that anybody was down was Kansas Crossing, and they were down about 17%, and Boot Hill was down about 20%. So across the board, between 17 and 20%, they were down as a result of the last year and the pandemic. Let's move through the individual casinos. Let's start with let's talk about revenues that we talked about that. Let's move into total casino revenue for 2020. State of Kansas for 2020 got about 73.6 million. Cumulative through 2020, the state has received $709 million from our casino operations. Problem Gaming and Addictions Fund got 6.7 million from the casinos. As I mentioned, they got the bigger share of their revenue from casino operations. Cumulatively, Problem Gaming and Addictions has gotten about $64 million since the casinos started opening about 10 years ago. City and county got about $10 million through fiscal year 2020, and for overall, they've gotten about $96 million since the casinos opened. And then we, of course, have the privilege fees, which this was a one-time fee that all the casinos paid in there. That's about $61 million. So we don't get that annually or anything. We get that. We got that one time. Let's move on to the Southeast Gaming Zone, which is our newest casino. Southeast Gaming Zone covers Crawford and Cherokee counties. They were opened with approximately 575 slot machines and 16 table games. Currently, under COVID restrictions, they are operating at 346 slot machines, and the number of players at each table game has been reduced. Total gaming facility revenues for fiscal year 2020 was about 28.6 million. And then you can see in your testimony what contractually they break down to for each casino as we move forward. State of Kansas gets 22%, for example. The casino manager gets 73%. City of Pittsburgh gets 1%. Crawford County gets 1%. Cherokee County gets 1%. And the Problem Gaming and Addictions Fund gets 2%. I won't go through each of those breakdowns for each individual zone because you can see them in your testimony. Let's move to the South Central Gaming Zone, which is Sumner and Sedgwick counties. That is our Kansas Star Casino. Pre-COVID, the casino housed over 1,650 slot machines and 62 table games, including a 10-table dedicated poker room. They, of course, have hotel and dining facilities like a number of our casinos. Currently, active slot machines number just over 900, along with 44 reduced capacity table games, and the poker room is also closed currently. Fiscal year 2020 revenues for them was $150.4 million. Moving to the Northeast Gaming Zone, which is just solely Wyandotte County and our Hollywood Casino. Since opening, the casino offered approximately 2,000 slot machines and 50 table games, including a 12-person dedicated poker room. Post-pandemic, those numbers have been reduced to about 1,200 slot machines, 20 restricted table capacity games, and no poker tables. Their revenue for fiscal year 2020 was $122 million, roughly. Moving finally to the Southwest Gaming Zone, which is Ford County, our friends out in Dodge City. Slot machines on the floor originally was approximately 650 with 21 table games, and that included 2 poker tables. Current restrictions have reduced those numbers to about 415 machines, 16 table games, and no poker tables. The gaming revenue for fiscal year 2020 for Boot Hill was about $33 million. And you can, of course, then see the breakdown for what they distribute to the locals and to the state via their contract. We sometimes get questions about racetrack gaming facilities, the 3 racetracks that exist in the state. Currently, none of those facilities are licensed by the KRGC, and we in the last year received no significant inquiries regarding reopening or placing machines at any of those facilities. So with that, that's a lot to take in. I appreciate your time. I would be happy to answer any questions that I can. I will also allow or ask Matt to chime in at this point, anything that I might have forgotten to mention, but we stand ready for your question.
All right, Matt, do you have anything that you'd like to continue a discussion about?
No, I think Steve covered it real well. I think your questions about the thank you, Chairman and committee members. Your questions about the effect of COVID and the casino revenues are pretty well outlined there on page 4 of the testimony, with the essentially 18% overall decline due to that shutdown for the 2 months. And then the effects where we're down about 16-17% so far in fiscal 21 due to the limitations and restrictions that Steve went over as well. The one thing I would really note, and I've heard Steve brag on the casino managers, and we'll brag on Steve a little bit as well, and Don Brownlee for the effort and constant contact that they were in with the casino managers during that initial shutdown period, and working to come up with a safe and responsible way to open those casinos back up and to get those through and going. And the fact that since the end of May to now, you've not heard any stories or news headlines about issues there, it's because they've all been very dedicated to following the protocols that have been put in place, and they've done an excellent job with the casino managers and their staff of preventing problems from happening and preventing negative news stories and preventing things from being even worse. So really like to take the time to commend them and the effort that Steve and Don did to headline the work at each of our agencies and to make those things happen.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'd like to add just for a second, Mr. Chairman, that Matt is absolutely correct. All of the casinos have done we continue to have weekly calls with them to make sure sort of where things are and how things are progressing, whether they have any COVID issues or people that are on quarantine or are out and having tested positive for the virus. And but they have done a tremendous job over the last 10 months to try and maintain the safety of the folks that are in their facilities, and we have to commend them for being very proactive in that area. And it's been a tremendous group effort on everybody on their part, everybody at the KRGC, and a lot of our lottery staff to make sure that that is, has been operational as best we can in the current circumstances.
All right, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Stephen. And actually, Stephen, I think in your last comments, your connection was disrupted. So I think we got the gist of what you were trying to say in regards to the casinos and COVID-19.
Right.
Like I said, I think we got exactly what the substance was that you were trying to explain to the committee. The one question, I have a few questions, and I don't know if you want to answer this, Stephen or Matt. But the first is, where I live in the state, I'm in the Wichita media market. And it seems like when I'm watching the local news programs or channels, there's a lot of advertising for the casinos in Oklahoma. And I'm not seeing many advertising commercials for the Kansas Star or the Boot Hill Casino. So what is the advertising effort to try to generate sales in those two casinos? Because I'm seeing Oklahoma casinos commercials all the time, but I'm not seeing anything for the casinos that are actually located in Kansas.
We do. We have a very good relationship with the casinos in regard to their advertising. The casinos push their advertising through us for approval, but they are designing their own advertising plans. They are the ones who decide their marketing plans, and we have an approval process for that and the specific ads that they run. I know in the last year or so, the Oklahoma casinos have really made a very concerted effort to try and push their presence in the Kansas markets more than they have in years past. And I think that has to do a lot with the fact that the Kansas Star and Dodge City casinos have impacted a lot of the Oklahoma casinos in ways that maybe they didn't they didn't expect. We can ask them specifically what their plans are. I think that maybe there's been an attempt over the last year or so to use some of maybe the marketing money that they had been using to do other things, in order to try and protect players, PPE and putting up dividers and that sort of thing. But we'll inquire as to if they have a specific plan moving forward as they come out of the pandemic to maybe get their face and name out there a little bit more.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And actually, I've had the opportunity to visit Boot Hill, the Star, and also Hollywood. I have not visited Kansas Crossing in Pittsburgh, but plan to at some point. But I'm kind of wondering, in all of those three facilities with, Boot Hill, Star, and Pittsburgh, they have an adjacent hotel that is kind of partnered with the casino. We do not have that at the Hollywood Star Casino, and actually this has been a contention of mine for many years. And we're talking about the revenues of the Hollywood Casino. Has there ever been a projection made of an increase of sales, or the possibility of an increase of sales and revenue generated from Hollywood if they would have a hotel at that facility?
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman, and I think that you are not alone in your questions about why Hollywood does not have a hotel. Just as sort of a history lesson, as we went through the selection process for the Northeast Zone, there were a number of facilities that were proposed by a number of different companies. And the one that ended up winning it just happened to be the only one that didn't have a hotel attached to the property. And there have been ongoing discussions with Hollywood over the years about whether, when, and if, and how they are going to build a hotel. They do actually have an agreement with the local counties, in Wyandotte County specifically, they end up, because they did not build a hotel in time for their agreement with the county, they are paying them a certain amount of money per year, and I don't remember exactly how much that is, because they did not build a hotel. Originally, when they explained their intent behind not having a hotel right away, their argument is that there were so many hotels around the Speedway area already, and there certainly were and are a number of hotels that have been built and have been around for a long time, that they didn't feel that a hotel was specifically necessary, that maybe what they would do is offer a busing program between the hotels that were already in existence to come to the casino rather than building a hotel facility. That continues to be a question that a number of legislators raise every year. We talk with them about it a lot. I mean, I don't think that there is necessarily, I don't think that they've done anything recently, a certain study-wise, with regard to if it would increase the revenue stream or not. I can ask them if they have done anything recently, or if anybody's done anything recently, if the local folks have, but I am not aware or have not seen anything within the last several years.
And I think, and I was just conversing with Representative Wolfmore, and we both agree that I think the penalty for not having a hotel with Wyandotte County is about $1 million a year that they pay because they did not build a hotel. I would also contend that there are numerous people that have told me that they will not go to Hollywood because they don't have a hotel, and they will actually go to the Missouri side because they do. And so I just want to, put that out there, that I think in regards to Hollywood, they could have increased revenues if they actually would construct a hotel by their facility, because there are a lot of players who would prefer to be at a casino that has a hotel adjacent or close by. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
No, and that is certainly an argument that we hear. At this point, there is no contractual obligation that they have to build a hotel. There are that we have discussions, and obviously there, as you mentioned, there are legislators that bring this up every year, and it's certainly something we continue to discuss with them, and we will continue to discuss with them for sure.
All right, thank you. And then also, I just kind of wanted to explain to the committee, I know this has been brought up when I have attended many meetings across my district, and when the Lottery Act of 1987 was passed, there was dedicated funds, as both Gabrielle and Stephen mentioned, and those were designated funds of the lottery revenues. The misconception by the public sometimes is that the money was supposed to be for education. And there are a lot of people that have told me when they were debating this bill back in the late 1980s, is that's what they were told, is that the funds were going to go towards education. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if you happen to have a town hall or a meeting with your local school board districts, because that's where this seems to be coming up a lot, is that when that was passed in 1987, it goes, like as mentioned before, the first $50 million that the state generates. And is that, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, is that up to 33% of the revenues of the lottery?
Yes, I believe that is correct. And, it should, you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman, that somehow along the way, the narrative about this money going to education sort of crept into the discussion. And it was never designed for education from the beginning of the Lottery Act. I think that one of the reasons why it became such a narrative was that Missouri, their lottery money, a good portion of it goes to education. And they've made a very conscious effort over the last 10 years to heavily promote that fact through their advertising campaigns. And so I think that somehow that may have transferred, particularly in some of the markets that get Kansas City stations, the idea that Kansas's money goes to education. I should mention, of course, that the money that goes to the state general fund, a good portion of the state general fund money goes to education. So indirectly, we are giving money to education, but it goes through the state general fund first. So.
Well, and I was just going to point that out too, because when we talk about the 4 different silos that the money goes to, as established by the Lottery Act in 1987, you have of the first $50 million of that 33% of total revenues, it goes to the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, and then the Juvenile Detention Facilities Fund, Correctional Institutions Building Fund, and the Problem Gambling and Addictions Grant Fund. And so I have always made the contention that of that 33% of the overall revenues, anything above the $50 million goes to the state general fund, and since K through 12 education is more than half of the state general fund budget portion, then you could say approximately $8 million then goes towards K through 12 education, since we received $16.1 million into the state general fund.
Yes, sir.
Representative Helgerson.
If I might digress for just a second, since I was the only one here in '87, that's exactly what we did say. The money goes for education, but it goes through the state general fund, or it went to the regent's institutions. And that's how the discussion went about education. Let me go to first the casinos. Did any of the casinos receive federal PPP loans, and how was that treated?
To my knowledge, sir, they did not. I do know that they did request individual. They did agree. They did request individual help from the state through some of the protection acts that the state had in place. To my knowledge, they never received any of those benefits that they requested. They, as I mentioned before, they really did a tremendous job trying to protect their people through the first several months of the pandemic. A lot of them kept the entirety of their payroll on, or a lot of their staff on payroll for as long as they could during the pandemic. They tried to avoid layoffs as much as they could. And so when they reopened, they tried to bring back as much of their staff as they could. So to my knowledge, they did not receive anything, but we will double check and find out.
Yeah, if you could officially ask whether or not they received federal or state money for in the last year. And I commend them for all the health things they have done out there. So second question, which goes to the contracts, which you brought up, and also Hollywood. A continual point that I have had is that when the legislature made the decision to pass the laws, we had a specific provision that the contract would be renewed or be extended for 10 years. I think that was 10 years.
15,
and
sir.
In 2000, pardon, was it?
15.
15, okay, 15. In the next 5 to 10 years, they start coming up for renewal. Without legislative action, the governor can take action to renew contracts with the providers, with the casinos, without our discussion or involvement. Chairman may remember that I've introduced a proviso in a bill several times and have had success getting the proviso done for 1 year, but it's a continual issue that I have. And I'd like to know, first of all, has the governor had already, this current governor renewed one contract without legislative discussion. Has there been any other renewals of the contracts without legislative discussion?
No, there is one contract that is in discussion currently. It has not been renewed as of yet, but there is one in sort of discussion right now. And a lot of them, there are two that have not been renewed. There's one that's been renewed, and there's one that is in discussion. And a lot of the issues, particularly with the smaller casinos, is during the pandemic, their cash flow was obviously tremendously impacted. And for them to be able to continue to operate, a refinance package sometimes became necessary. And when you go out to lenders and they see, oh, you've only got 5 years, 10 years left on this contract, they can't make the loan based on the amount of time left in the contract. So that's where the idea of the possible extension comes into play. But that's where we are currently.
Okay. Is that proprietary information, or can we know who's trying to renegotiate their contract now?
No, I mean, it's right now it is, right now it is Kansas Crossing that is attempting to renegotiate their contract. Yes.
Okay. Understand, I have a real concern that suddenly the legislature is not involved in this renegotiation process, especially when there's been discussion about a hotel in Hollywood and whether or not that should happen or not happen, this is our only opportunity to have any input. That's why I think that it should be brought back to the legislature for any kind of oversight or review before contracts are negotiated. The third thing I'd just bring up quickly about the lottery. Initially, the lottery, when it was passed and after several years, was $35. On average, every Kansan was spending about $35 in lottery tickets if you distributed the population versus the amount of money that was being sold for lottery tickets. In the last 5 years, I noticed that it had gone up to $100 per person, meaning that we have a lot more money being spent on lottery than the population. And in asking a former colleague that we had in here who used to be involved with the lottery, he said that if you look at it, you have a real high propensity of some populations and some individuals to spend a great deal of their money on lottery tickets. I'm assuming that you have that information and that research to show how much is now being spent and by what segments of the Kansas population on lottery tickets.
Well, I haven't seen any, we haven't done anything in particular with regard to our own in-state research. That's a pretty expensive proposition to try and fund. And I have not heard the $30 versus $100 or whatever the numbers you just quoted were. You know, there have been studies done, and I'm speaking just sort of more from anecdote here than I am from remembering specific numbers from a specific study. You know, the idea that any specific population group spends a disproportionate amount of money on lottery products is sort of a misnomer. It depends on the way that you conduct the research. For example, you know, one research group that I saw basically was trying to figure out the percentage of sales at individual retailers, whether or not you know, based on, you know, sort of the income level in those retail locations. Well, you know, if you look at where gas stations are placed, for example, a lot of times gas stations and convenience stores are placed where the land is cheap. And you know, the joke is that you don't see a lot of gas stations in Beverly Hills because they can't afford to build in that particular area. So you end up sort of with a disproportionate number of percentage of sales coming from gas stations and convenience stores just based on where they're located. So, you know, obviously there are questions, you know, we get questions like this a lot, and it's been one of those things that, you know, particularly in the last year or so, you know, people's desire for entertainment has been, you know, sort of stretched. I mean, they can't go to the movies, they can't go to ball games, you know, and so we think that they've been spending some of their money on lotteries to spend their entertainment dollar. And we certainly don't encourage anyone to want to spend money that they can't afford to spend. You know, we view ourselves as an entertainment company that is just happens to be owned by the state. And as a result of that, we, you know, don't want anybody to certainly play that can't afford to play. So
I understand what you just said, and I guess what I heard was we don't have any information of who's playing the lottery.
well, we don't have anything. We haven't drilled down specifically into like player classes or income levels or anything like that. We know who's playing the lottery based on where our people are you know, buying their tickets and that sort of thing. But we don't have anything specific. We haven't done any studies based on gender or income level or education level or anything like that. That's what I mean.
If we are marketing it, wouldn't it be helpful to have?
We have, like I said, we have a general idea of where those people are. But again, to run a study of that nature, you know, those sorts of research decisions are very expensive to run. And so we've been trying to use our money as effectively as we can. So if the decision is made that that's something that you guys would like to see, we can certainly try to make sure that we are able to do that in the future.
I will see if I can find something to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Estes.
Thank you. Steve, on page 3 of your testimony under special projects, you say the lottery has increased its presence and partnership with KSU and KU. Can you define for me what you mean by presence? Do you mean that there's more availability of tickets on campus?
No, we do not have any locations on. We don't sell on campus. No, we don't. It's for a long time we were sponsoring things like the coaches show after the games. We were sponsoring radio programs and that sort of thing. We found that our players were very interested in being a part of the KU and K-State and other schools, the adventures of those particular facilities. And so we have a rotating, we send players to suites at K-State games. We send people to one of our prize packages was not last year, but the year before last, we sent people to the Champions Classic in New York when KU played Duke in Madison Square Garden, sent them with a hotel room and that sort of thing. So that's what we mean by increased our presence. And it's been very popular with players. They enjoy both the KU and the K-State, the experiences that we've been able to offer. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask, who oversees the Problem Gambling and Addiction Grant Fund?
That is not us. That is, I believe it's KDADS is responsible for that. They get the money, and we do not. We don't. Once we earn it and send it over, we don't have any responsibility for that.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Chairman, can we get a report on how that's spent?
Well, and actually, I would probably defer that to Chairman Carpenter when he has the discussion in regards to KDAD's budget on exactly how that money is being spent. And actually, Vice Chairman Hoffman and I were just talking about when you look at $6.6 million received in the Problem Gambling Fund through the casinos. What are they doing with those funds? And so I think that would be something in regards to the report out that Chairman Carpenter will be analyzing when he goes through their budget in his budget committee.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going to it'd be page 2 of your testimony on the mental health programs, the 1.7 million. Now that is the money that would come from the vending machines. Is that correct?
Correct.
And how much is supposed to be going? How much did we put in our budget to go to that?
That I don't remember, and I'm not sure that we would know. I'll ask Matt if he has an idea. Matt?
Yes, thanks, Steve. The statutory language is an up to $8 million per year, and we understood that as we started to roll out the machines, which we just started that program in the last fiscal year, in fiscal year 20, that it would be a buildup for those kinds of things. So the amount that's budgeted in the appropriations bill looking forward for fiscal 21, I believe, is $4 million. The amount included in I'm good to see Gabrielle nodding as I go along. I'm watching it out of the corner of my screen. And for fiscal year 22, I believe is $6 million. So we're building up as we get more of those machines in place. Players get more accustomed to them, and the activity through them increases. So so far with where we're at through this part of the fiscal year, we're well on pace to hit that 4 million number, and going forward. And one of the things we talked about, Steve talked about the additional planned future purchases of potentially another 70 machines in each of the 2 new years should get us up to that full capacity, where that 8 million number annually should be pretty much the target and goal going forward. But like I said, we're still building up to that.
And when again do you think you'll have the 8 million goal, when you'll hit that goal?
Like I said, this year we're on pace, a little ahead of pace for the 4 million that's included in the CRE and the appropriations bill. The 6 million that's included in the fiscal 22. If we added another 70 machines in each of those 2 years, and obviously social environments rebound, and we get those EX machines placed that Steve talked about, I'd say by the time we're at fiscal 23 and going forward, that 8 million a year should be pretty much the norm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question has been answered.
All right. Representative Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. Part of my questions and comments, we're going to go back to particularly Hollywood Casino. Mr. Durrell is absolutely correct that a number of legislators have raised the issue about the hotel. About 3 years ago, we did have a meeting with the management team, and they did present to members of the Wyandotte County delegation a rendering of a future convention center build out as well as a hotel. But since that time, there has been very little discussion as to when or if they are still planning on building that. In reference to the revenue sharing, it's 1% of the net profits that the casino generates goes to Wyandotte County in place of the hotel not being built. So that 1% was put into the management agreement between the unified government and the owner of the Hollywood Casino, the management team. And he was absolutely correct too. When the gaming bill was being discussed, Missouri was running their education funding support for their casinos in Missouri. And there is a large amount of population that still believes those dollars go into education. But I do appreciate the sharing of the amount of monies that the lottery puts towards education. And I think that's the misnomer that a lot of the public has, that the lottery and the racing and gaming are two different entities. And it's very difficult to communicate that to the public unless you take the time to differentiate the two. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion and clear those issues up.
All right. Thank you, Representative. Committee, any further questions for Stephen or for Matt? Not seeing any. Thank you, Stephen and Matt, for being here and giving us update on the Kansas Lottery and also the Kansas Gaming and Racing Commission. All right, committee, we're going to go ahead and move into the next item on the agenda, and that is actually a bill hearing on House Bill 2094, which would create the Wartime Veteran and First Responder Survivors Grant Program and Fund. And so I will turn it over to Jill Walters, the revisor, who will go over House Bill 2094. Jill?
Good morning, sir, and members of the committee. This is Jill Walters. Can I confirm that you could hear me, please?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much, sir. House Bill 2094 establishes the Wartime Veteran and First Responders Survivors Grant Program and Fund. The fund is established in the state treasury and is administered by the Board of Regents. Expenditures from the fund shall be used for educational grants to survivors of wartime veterans and first responders. On June 30 of each year, the Director of Accounts and Reports shall determine if there's any unencumbered funds in the grant fund in excess of $350,000, and if there are, the amount is transferred to the state general fund. There's a grant program established, subject to appropriations. 30 grants may be awarded to survivors, and that'll be determined by the board. The grant award is for tuition, books, and fees for students to attend college at a Kansas post-secondary educational institution. The who is eligible for that will actually be certified by the Kansas Commission on Veterans Affairs Office, and then they would have to prove that they've been accepted into a college or university or technical college in Kansas. To remain eligible for this, you have to be in good standing and making satisfactory progress toward the program or toward your college courses. And if you have already received a bachelor's degree, you would not be eligible to receive a grant. on or before March 1st, 2020, the State Board of Regents adopts rules and regs, and it's what they're supposed to adopt rules and regs is in the bottom. How we define who would be eligible for this. First of all, the post-secondary educational institution that survivors would be able to attend is any public university, municipal university, community college, or technical college in Kansas. A survivor who would be able to get this college tuition would be a child who's less than 25 years of age, of the qualified wartime veteran or qualified first responder. And these people would have to be less than 25 years in age and be a dependent at the time of death or injury, or within 5 years after the injury. It also includes not only the child, but a spouse of such wartime veteran or qualifying first responder. Now, a qualifying first responder would be an employee of a law enforcement office, sheriff's department, fire department, volunteer or non-volunteer fire protection association or EMS provider who was employed after September 11, 2001 and was killed or died from injuries when they were performing their duties, or they were injured or disabled when they were discharging the duties. And it's the same as the wartime veteran. They would need to be a member of the armed services of the United States after September 11th, 2001. And during the time of war, they had to have been a Kansas resident, and they were either killed or disabled in combat, or certified by the VA to have passed away or sustained injuries attributable while this combat service was occurring, or they're entitled to compensation for a service-connected disability of at least 80% because of the injury or accident sustained in combat. The bill would become effective on publication in the statute book. And just for the new folks who are here and might not have heard this information during a previous committee hearing, statute book at the end of the bill means July 1st of the year it was enacted. And there's a statute. I'm sorry that I'm not remembering off the top of my head the statute, but there's a statute that controls that says statute book means July 1st. Just for information of those of folks who might be recalling this from last year, there was an identical bill last year, but it didn't have a hearing in the legislature due to the shutdown or the recessing early of the session. That is what the program and the fund does, and I'd be pleased to stand for questions if you had any, sir.
All right, thank you, Jill, and thank you for explaining upon printing of the statute book or publication, the difference between the two in regards to how bills are passed and when they become enacted. Representative Wolfmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to confirm what I think I'm reading. So there's just an estimate on how much this would, what the fiscal note would be, but it looks like about $232,000 per year. Is that right?
That's what the fiscal note says, ma'am. Yes.
And that's an estimate because we're not sure how many people would take advantage of it, correct?
Correct. And I might just point out that there is no appropriation in this bill and no transfer into that. So that would need to be done in the appropriation bill. This is just establishing a program. And then if funded, this is what would happen.
I see. That's helpful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions for Jill? All right, not seeing any. Thank you, Jill, for being here.
Thank you, sir.
We'll go ahead and turn it over to testimony. And the first individual that I have is Wendy Doyle, and she is the Chief Executive Officer for United We.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm honored to be with you today virtually. My name is, as the chairman said, Wendy Doyle, and I am the president and CEO of United We. The mission of United We is to advance all women's economic and civic leadership. And I appear before you today to submit testimony in support of House Bill 2094. United We sees this as a step in the right direction to support the dignity and livelihood of survivors and families of our Kansas heroes. Our support of this legislation is based on two objective research studies that United We commissioned. The first study is titled Project Diane, which was commissioned with University of Kansas and focused on the integration of women into leadership positions within the U.S. Army Special Forces, but with application across all branches of military. The second study, which really supports our support of this bill, is titled The Status of Women in Kansas, also commissioned with University of Kansas, focuses on key economic development indicators, and we're working to develop a baseline to monitor our state's progress toward these key indicators. The House Bill 2094 is core to overcoming some of the challenges and building up on the opportunities highlighted in both of these research studies. The establishment of this fund would greatly benefit Kansas military and first responder families, both women and men, by giving their children and spouses of veterans or first responders killed or injured in the line of duty with the opportunity to seek a higher education without the stress of tuition expenses or going into debt. Investing in these families positions them to fully participate in the Kansas workforce. We applaud efforts like this that recognize the holistic and long-term sacrifices made by our Kansas military and first responder families. Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Doyle, for being here. Committee, do you have any questions for Ms. Doyle in regards to House Bill 2094? Not seeing any? Thank you again for being here this morning.
Thank you.
The other testimony they have with a position of being a proponent is from Mick Shanks, the president of the Kansas State Fraternal Order of Police Committee. That is only written testimony. So that concludes the testimony that we have in regards to House Bill 2094. As far as those who would to speak as a proponent position, I'm not showing any opponents or neutral testimony in regards to House Bill 2094. So with that, committee, the hearing is closed on House Bill 2094. Committee, we do not have a committee meeting scheduled for tomorrow or for Monday. As I mentioned at the beginning of today's meeting, we will be starting with the budget recommendations from our budget committees next Thursday. And so next Friday, we are scheduled to also have a committee meeting. We will not be having a meeting scheduled on February 8th. We had a discussion about that yesterday with the meeting that I had with the budget chairs, and the reason why we're not having a meeting on February 8th is because the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl. So that is why we're not going to be having a meeting scheduled on that Monday morning following that. So I thought of all of you when I was doing the agenda planning. But as I mentioned before, next week we are starting with the budget recommendations. We do have, as put by the research department, a very aggressive schedule of trying to get all those budget recommendations out before we go to turnaround. As I mentioned to the budget chairs, and also I mentioned before, obviously that is fluid. We'll see how it goes, but right now that is according to the document that was handed out earlier this morning to you in regards to the dates for the budget recommendations. That's our tentative schedule for all the budget recommendations. And then after we get back from turnaround, we'll obviously work on the budget proposals. So with that, committee, we are adjourned until Tuesday morning at 9 a.m.